ago. It's been a while. So I was at Cisco for a while, then BB&T. I was at Juniper for 12 years. I took early retirement out of there, but while I was at Juniper, I did a lot of work on the secure development lifecycle and the common weakness enumeration, including getting to write an annual top 10 weakness report from across the company. That was kind of cool. And then most recently, I was at Pure Storage. I'm between jobs right now, so green band. So if you have something that you think would be interesting to me, let me know. For today, this talk has two purposes. One is to ignite that spark in lockpicking. I think a lot of people in here in cybersecurity actually have never really cavorted with locks. And I encourage you to do that. It is so mind-opening. You learn a lot that way. Yeah, okay, calm down. You can learn a lot. You know, it's like Ibarra said, you can observe a lot just by watching. Just watching at a lockpick village, watching other people picking locks for the first time can be incredibly encouraging. So one of the things I've learned over the years doing both the secure development lifecycle stuff and the lockpicking and also being on the scene of many major accidents on the internet is that there are a lot of things that have happened in the lock industry that the outside world is ignorant of. And it's a shame because, hey kids, don't try this at home sort of thing. There are lots of those examples. And so this talk is structured around a set of vignettes. I apologize for starting late. I hope we get through these in time. I have 2 bonus vignettes, 2.5, if we have time for those. But the goal is that each one of these vignettes is an error, an issue, a flaw, a weakness of some sort of locking mechanism, and it has a message for software development. There's also messages for cybersecurity in general, but mainly software development. And feel free to stop and ask questions anytime. Keep in mind, there are a lot of people who haven't done this. I know some of you in here are experts. Try to be patient as I go through this. I have to explain single pin picking in order to get through the first vignette and then move on. So lock sport, for those of you who don't know, it's a great thing to bring up with TSA. It's a true story. Back before they had the approved list, I was making a trip to San Jose with my art box full of lock paraphernalia. My boss wanted me to do a tutorial for the team and whoever else wanted to attend. Didn't know whether I was going to get through security with it. My wife followed me to RDU, ready for me to give her my wooden art box if they said no, can do, and she was going to ship it. And I was busy with all my other stuff. And this woman from TSA approaches me across the conveyor thing, and she hands me my art box, and she says, leans in real conspiratorially, and she goes, "Are you some kind of security expert?" And before I could answer, she said, "That was so cool." So you can have a lot of fun with this stuff. So it's mostly a social endeavor. It can be competitive. I will tell you, I'm a certified soccer referee, and one of the reasons I'm a soccer referee is because I suck at playing soccer. And I suck at the competitive aspect of this. I am generally one of the last to succeed, but I succeed. And single pin picking is just a jumping off point for one particular type of lock. There's a whole universe of stuff out there to explore. 2 cardinal rules, and I tell this to everybody in my lock picking tutorials. You never pick a lock you don't own or have explicit permission to pick. Trust me on this. Really important. Second rule is you never pick a lock you depend upon. If you go home from this talk today and you decide to screw around with the front door on your house and mess it up, and so it doesn't work anymore, and somebody has to stay home while somebody else goes up to Home Depot to buy a new door lock, can't say I didn't warn you, okay? Since I mentioned Home Depot, Lowe's, and the other big box stores, one of the best resources is the end cap where stuff's on clearance. So you can go buy your patio door locks and your doorknobs and other stuff there. It's great fodder at half price to experiment with. I am not a lawyer, okay? You need to check your local laws and ordinances wherever you live, wherever you work, wherever you travel. You need to know what the rules are. I have some very unkind things to say about the baggage handlers in San Jose and San Francisco in particular, where everything else is above board with the feds, and they decide to be creative. I'll share that later over a beer. In North Carolina, for an example, you cannot accept any reimbursement for any lock picking you may do. So if your neighbor's locked out, the dog's stuck inside the garage, and you can't get the door open, and I'll help you out, and they try to press $10 in your hand or something, don't do it, okay? Out of the goodness of your heart. do not accept reimbursement in North Carolina for lock picking. Okay? We clear? Any questions? Yes, sir. Oh, but we're clear.
That's a good one.
Okay, thank you.
Reimbursement?
I'm sorry?
Is it beer count as reimbursement?
Maybe. I'll say no, but don't test it. Okay, just don't. I will tell you, and we learned this with the Pearl Wars back in the day with Larry Wall and not Larry Wall, but not Tom Christensen. Oh, geez, I'm getting old and feeble. But the massive incident that occurred at Intel was somebody doing Pearl work, and the observation everybody got out of that is making case law for new examples in technology goes badly for everybody involved. Okay, so just don't give yourself the opportunity. So you probably already read the slide while I was mumbling about. So it's a great way to stimulate interest, and there's the vignettes, and I already said, please bear with me a minute. Okay, so a little bit of terminology. The large yellow circle is the cylinder. That's the general overall housing for the lock. This smaller inset yellow cylinder is called the plug. That's the thing that we turn with the key when we put the key in the lock, okay? In this very first image on the left, you have that little bit of red. That's what you would see if you were looking at a lock from the outside. That red part is the bottom pin. In the middle diagram, we see the bottom pin, and the blue part is the top pin, and then there's a spring above that. The space where the blue plug part is and up into the spring is called the Bible. I'm not sure why, but that's what they call it in some cases. When we insert the proper key, when the lock is at rest, like in the middle diagram, and I forgot, there's a diagram, thank you, Deviant. Deviant did all the work for these diagrams, and I don't see how anybody has the patience for all of the master keying stuff and the impressioning. Oh my God, did you sleep? It's crazy. So we'll talk about impressioning later, but that's truly super normal. So in the resting position, the top pin, that blue one you see is wedged in there. It prevents the plug from being rotated. So it basically keeps the lock from being open. Got it? Any questions? All right. So when a correctly operating lock, when we put the correct key in, we see that rightmost diagram. It raises the bottom pin, and it raises it to something called the shear line, which is where the plug is turning inside of the cylinder. All right, that's basic lock functionality. Now we're just looking at one pin. What happens when we're looking at more than one pin? We have this diagram, and I think I have to hit this one more. So this is what happens when you use the correct key. The correct key is inserted in the lock, and all of the bottom pins are raised to the correct height. They match the shear line. The plug can be turned. Any questions? You guys are all brilliant. Okay. So now, how do we use this? Why is this important? In a perfect world, everything's aligned. It's all, was it Tom Lehrer said Skittles and beer? I don't think he meant the candy Skittles either. But so in a perfect world, these holes, for example, on the left-hand side, they match the pins on the other side there. It's just turned, and it's a plan view as opposed to the elevation on the right. But those holes are lined up perfectly straight, and everything's happy. There's unicorns and rainbows and all of the rest of that. Now, I want you to watch the ones on the left really carefully while I change slides and see if you notice the shift. Oops, I forgot. I'm sorry. Everything would bind at the same time. Okay, now watch. Did you see it? Yes? No? So what happened here was there was a slight shift, and those holes are no longer perfectly lined up. That means that when you attempt to turn the lock without the key, one of those pins is going to bind. The objective here is to find the pins that are binding one after the other and raise them up to the shear line. And so in this case, that one's binding. So what we're going to do here is, you notice in the left diagram, is we've put a little bit of torsion on there, and it's torsion, I'm sorry, not tension, because it's rotational. You use a torsion wrench. So you apply a slight bit of torsion to keep the cylinder from flopping back the other direction, and you force the pin up. And as you force it up, when it matches the shear line, it'll literally feel like it'll snap. You'll feel it. You might even hear it if you're listening carefully enough. So what does that do when we're looking at 5 pins? So when you do 5 pins, one at a time, you raise them up until you find each one that's binding, and just keep iterating till you found all 5. Notice it found the 5th one now. Now they're going to go back to the first 2. And I'm never that disciplined to remember exactly which pin was binding or not like LPL or DV and the other people. I just sort of stumble around like a sow looking for an acorn. And eventually I'm lucky. So I'm not that good. Any questions about this one? You guys are all brilliant, or you've been doing the Lockpick Village for a while.
Do they all understand why the pins are staying up? Is that little lip?
That's a good point. So thank you. So you just mentioned why the pins are staying up. They're staying up because you've got that rotational torsion on the plug. As you hold that in place, it's binding. And so once that pin pops up, it can't fall back down into the hole. That make sense? Good, thank you. So, want to know more? I want to point out, I have some goodies here. One of them is a set of picks, and then I have my own collection of carefully curated progressive cylinders. Now, you'll notice on each one of these, that one says, what? That's a 4? I have to put it in front of the camera, don't I? Yeah. So I've stamped each one of these. These are carefully curated, artisanal, progressive cylinders. There's number 2. And for particularly good answers here this afternoon, I am going to contribute cylinders and picks. So that's the... What's that?
The audience can win things?
Yes, the audience can win things. So, yeah, don't throw it. Yeah, I'm not throwing, yeah, that way you can hear that, right? I'm sorry, my nose has decided to give me a hard time. I have to set one of these out. All right, so I just wanted to demonstrate those in the context of a progressive cylinder. They have a different number of pin sets. They start with 2 pins, then 3 and 4 and 5. And the reason we do that is if you were picking and you used to start out and try to get all 5 or 6 pins at once, you would be so demoralized because you would fail. And you'd be really frustrated. And so with progressive cylinders, you get that joy, that frisson of experience when you manage to raise those 2 pins up and turn that plug. Advice from me, when you're learning how to do single pin picking, once you succeed on one, do that same one again 5 or 6 times. You want to set that feeling. You want to feel that, memorize that sensation of those pins snapping in place and that plug turning. Just don't abandon one of those as soon as you succeed with it. So that was vignette 1, and if it wasn't obvious, vignette 1 is nobody makes a perfect law. Nobody makes perfect code. Nobody builds a perfect building. There are flaws in everything. Exploit the flaws so that you can improve things. Okay? That's the goal. Now, the next part I'm particularly enigmatic about because it just gets me frustrated. And that is that comb picks should not work. I took the... Oh, here they are. There's too many things on the table here. These are comb picks. You've probably seen these before. Some of you have these in your kits and you go, I don't know what that's for. And you're about to find out. So these are comb picks. This is not aiming where I want it. There we go. Seen those before? So these are different size and shape. They're different distances across the blades. There's different spacing between, the gaps between all are different. Comb picks work by lobotomizing the lock. Basically, with comb picks, where we were doing the single pin picking and raising each pin one at a time, comb picks succeed by raising all of the pins up. And they don't raise them to the shear line. They shove the whole pins up into the Bible. Right? It basically, literally, I'm not kidding when I say it lobotomizes the lock. It's gross. And in fact, I'm not going to demonstrate it because I decided to be clever one time, and I have my lovely acrylic locks here, and I I set that on 200 zoom, and I shouldn't have. I opened one of these acrylic locks, which are not cheap. They're cheaper now, and I was noticing covetously the price for the acrylic locks in the Oak City Lock Sport room. I got my comb pick stuck in one of my acrylic locks one time, and it took me 3 days to get it loose. So I don't do that one anymore. I'll just tell you about it. Why are comb picks working? There's a new generation of lock manufacturers that have come along, and they don't know the history. So comb picks have a really easy fix. Would somebody like to volunteer with the really easy fix for comb picks? Yes, please.
Make sure that the pin stack is tall.
I'm sorry?
A tall pin stack.
He's saying make sure the pin stack is tall enough.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're right. So you design your pins. The pin stack is the bottom and top pins. You design the combination of the two so that it's impossible to send the entire pins all the way up into the lock. Real easy fix. I'm not going to throw these. There you go. So we got a whole new generation designing locks. They don't know. And so what's happened now is that they're available. And now it's useful to have. When I first started picking locks, I didn't bother with comb picks because it was pointless. But now look what's in my everyday carry. I have a whole collection in my everyday carry. This is the Covert Instruments tool. So I've got the typical lock picking tools here, but I've wasted a lot of space on comb picks because they work again, and it's stupid. It should not work. I did, by the way, this set is out of this kit. This is my regular everyday carry that goes in my man purse. And this is my big kit here. So, serious stuff. All right. And yeah, this is also, if I fall off the bridge or something like that, I'm going to be emptying my pockets as fast as I can. So let's get to the next one here. Follow up to comb picks. One of my rules that I developed off of this is you should never write any network-based code based on a 3-digit RFC. And I've said that for years. And recently on a mailing list that I'm on, it turns out that Phil Lapsley is on that mailing list and surprised me by following up. That's his message. That's awesome. True words, sir, true words. Phil, author of, catch the 3-digit significance here? And I was like, Phil, this is brilliant. Phil is also the author of a book that you all should read called Exploding the Phone. It's a brilliant piece of work, and he really tells a great story. It's mostly about the ills of backward compliance, but there's some fascinating stuff in there. And some of that, you notice I have the telephone on the desk here. We're going to get to that in a minute. All right, vignette number 3, raking, no finesse, gets the job done. The message here is to understand the distinction between hobbyists and professionals. And this is an old comparison. If you hadn't heard it before, I'm sorry, but you should know this one. And the issue is hobbyists, for lack of a better word, hackers, I don't care. But the point is, those of you who really love doing this stuff, you want to do the cool hack. You want to write the cool code. You want to do stuff that wins the obfuscated C contest, that kind of stuff. You don't care for just trite, mundane stuff. But you know what? The bad guys out there, the criminal underground, the nation-state actors and all that, they're smart and they're efficient. And all they care about is writing code that's going to get the job done. They don't care about the cool hack. They will leave you in the dust. Okay? So it's important to understand this distinction. Okay, it gets the job done, it gets the lock open, we're good to go, but it is not finesse. Okay? It is fun to look at rakes. There's a whole bunch of rakes, and they have these really colorful names like the Bogota, which is named for the birthplace of one of the developers. And then there's another one called the Fogata, which is a takeoff on the Bogota. So there's rake wars out there. Raking works by vibrating the lock enough, especially if it's an old lock like this one, which is ancient. And I don't have the camera up right now. I'll show you that one in a minute. So old worn locks work particularly well for raking, and they get the job done. There's other advanced ways to do this. There's pick guns that you can use. They've you pull a trigger, and basically the blade pops the pins up. Bumping is a form of the same mechanism as raking. You can also get a lot of mileage out of an electric toothbrush. Cut off the head when it's no longer useful. Put a blade in, any simple blade, but it's got to be strong enough to turn the plug. Put the blade in there, zap it, and there's a lot of locks you can open that way. So this one, I'm just going to let play for a moment. So this should be pretty obvious. They're taking a large magnet, and there's a ferrous mechanism that's part of the bolt, and by putting the magnet up there, they're opening the safe. Now, I got worried about this one, and to prepare for this talk, I went to Harbor Freight and bought their big-ass 250-pound magnet and brought that sucker home. And it doesn't weigh 250 pounds. It can lift 250 pounds. Okay. You ask, why would somebody have something like this? Forget the treasure hunters doing the metal surfing in the beach. You take one of these things and go trolling for trolling motors. And you can be surprisingly successful. The point of this slide is, it's way cool that somebody figured out that you can put a magnet on the safe. And by the way, don't attempt this without a tube sock. Okay? Yeah, I'll never make that mistake again. In my case, it was gate hardware that jumped off the kitchen table and came at me to get to the magnet. I was holding it in my hand. So don't make that mistake. But the point is that once somebody does this once and puts it on a video, anybody can do it. Any fool can do it. I wish I had $10 for every time over the decades some executive said, well, it'd take a pretty smart hacker to exploit that flaw. Only the first time? Right? Just get that notion out of your head. It's been done. Yeah, so I experimented on our safe, and I'm not going to tell you what brand it was. It did not work, but I'm still not going to tell you which brand it was, because maybe some other flaw that I have to worry about. Just the mere fact that we've got the digital lock on the front gives me the wham-whams anyhow. All right, any questions so far? I buzzed through a couple of these slides, and I've got to watch my time here. We doing all right? Okay. So next one. I have particular animus for this one. My father-in-law loves the club. I think it's the stupidest thing since rocks were playing together. What's wrong with this? Right? Yes?
Cut the steering wheel?
Yeah, oh, you got that from the slide, did you? Yes, you cut the steering wheel. Why is this useful? $80,000 car? The steering wheel might cost $800? Hell yeah, you cut the steering wheel. Right? And now, here's the other part that's amazing about it. They paint this thing fluorescent hazard orange, red orange, as a deterrent. But once you got those bolt cutters in your hand, that deterrent becomes an attractant. Right? Let's not bother with just any car. Let's bother with the cars that must be so valuable someone's locked it with a club. And now also last night while I was reviewing these slides again, I was thinking about, the suggestions for Hollywood scripts. I used to work as a mechanic as well. I started thinking about what would happen if you had a scene like in The Americans where they paralyzed that dude, and then slowly killed him. But in this case, you strap him into the car, and you start the car up, and you hit the gas, and they're powerless to do anything about it, and the front of the car is going to hit a fence or a bollard or a utility pole at some point, and the airbag and the steering wheel is going to deploy. And I don't want to be part of the first responders that have to clean that up. I hate the club. I think it's stupid. But your mileage may vary. Anybody in here use the club now that I said that? just for science sake. Okay. All right. So, vignette number 6. You're going to love this one. Where'd I put the bypass tool? Here we go. So, in my kit, we see this lovely tool right here. That is an American lock bypass tool. Now, you know this will fail the first time I do that. So I have these two beauties here. 2 American locks. They each weigh like 14 pounds or something. I don't know. It's ridiculous. So,
Put it on camera.
thank you. So I'm going to take this tool, which has that little lever on the side of it there, and I'm going to put it in here. No key involved. and I put it in backwards. I did rehearse this beforehand. There we go. All right? No key involved. Oh, please don't applaud for that. Really, seriously, it's ridiculous. Now, why does that work? I have the companion one that actually has a thing installed in it. You see that? That little disc? You know, I should take this out. I'm sorry.
What you were using looked like a lockpick, but was not a lockpick.
It is not a lock pick. It is called a bypass tool, and it is strictly for the bypassing this. So this piece of foil, it's incredibly thin, it's incredibly weak. This is the disc that prevents that attack. So when these are installed, then that bypass tool does not work.
At the top where the lock goes inside, when it closes up, it catches it or something?
No, it actually, so what's happening here, without taking the lock apart, is I'm going past the pin tumbler mechanism, and there's no shield to prevent you from reaching the actual internal mechanism of the padlock itself. So I'm actually, I'm touching it because I'm hitting them on the way by, but technically I'm not touching the pins at all. So I'm going way past that, just setting that aside, and I'm reaching past it, and I'm turning to reach the cam that is actuated when you put the key in and turn it. When you have the correct key in and turn it, it turns the cam to release the lock. So I'm going past the pins, the actual lock mechanism itself, and I'm turning the cam that releases the shackle. That was an excellent question. Duck? No. You're welcome. I've got boxes and boxes of lock cylinders that I haven't set up as progressive locks, so I'm happy for them to find new homes. All right. So, lesson 6. All right. Is this obvious how bad this is? Now, not all American locks are fundamental. American actually makes some really good locks. But if you happen to hit that series, and, it's amazing how many locks you can open with that tool, and people go, ooh, you must be some cool lock picker. You didn't get pins at all, right? It's just a bypass. And so lesson 6, make sure your lock mechanism, your security mechanism and so forth, doesn't have a side entrance. And you'd be surprised how much of that there is in software. Yes, sir?
Do you think that the tools that exist now to punch through that wafer, so be able to stick the bypass tool all the way through, do you think those slow people down enough that they might try picking it, or they might try a different avenue?
That's an interesting point. Years ago, I used to work in the alarm business, and the fundamental observation when you're selling alarm systems is that the rate of burglaries is 1 out of 3. So that means, this customer or the one on either side of them is going to get burglarized at the time. And all you needed to do was offer a deterrent. Because the people at the time, the modes have changed now, you have to keep up with that. But at the time when I was doing that stuff, they were looking for items they could sell and hawk for drug money, basically. Which was an interesting shift because the decades before, people were stealing wedding silver and gold and other high-price items. It turns out it's hard to fence that stuff. And it shifted to where they were stealing cameras and stereo equipment, televisions and stuff like that. But you don't have to have much. A slight deterrent is going to send them to the neighbor on either side. And you're going to have a lovely neighborhood when you're sending the burglars to other folks. But any other questions on this one? All right. And before I forget. You all are so lucky that I'm not throwing these things. You're welcome. So, vignette number 7. I didn't do it. I did do it, but I didn't do it. Tubular locks. They look so cool. They look so interesting. I'm actually not going to do the camera on this one. I have a transparent tubular lock up here if you want to check this out later, similar to the other transparent locks. Be still my heart. They look impressive when they're on bike locks and all that. People who don't know anything about locks, they go, ooh, this is really secure. You know what? It's just a radial version of the linear lock. So it takes the same concept. Instead of having the pins lined up in a straight line, you have the pins lined up in a circle, and you have tools like these. They're actually in some ways they're easier to attack. That's right, I'm not doing video on that one, so I'm sorry. There are different diameters to fit different ones, but basically the same rules apply. You take your picking tools and you hold down part of the lock mechanism to provide that tension. Okay, it is torsion. To provide that torsion on the lock, and then you can sample pushing down the pins around in a circle till you find the one that's binding. Same rules apply. The difference is, one really cool thing, the difference is with a tool like this is, and it's the same tool that's in the picture on the left, is that with the correct tension on the tool itself, it has rubber bands or O-rings or something else to hold some pressure on the tabs. You can memorize the lock once you've picked it, which then means you can go off and cut more of them. Okay? So it both picks and decodes. That'd be important because later you will see, like with the Lishy tools, that they pick and decode. So security through obscurity is doomed to failure. I hate it with a passion. Don't do it. Okay? There's nothing uniquely special about these things. It's a pin tumbler lock. You can pick it in a similar fashion. Any questions? All right. The Bowley lock. This thing is astounding and brilliant. To their credit, the folks who built this thing, they don't pretend that it's perfect. There's two brothers in Canada, I think one of the Midwest provinces, and I've forgotten what, the Canadian Rockies, I'm sorry. And they set out to develop a really cool lock. It is really interesting to watch because basically it functions. Here's a bowling. I didn't do it. It was Susan. Here's a bowling lock right here. Massive, heavy thing. When I helped move my daughter and son-in-law back from Colorado back to Virginia, I really wished I'd had this one available to put on the back of the U-Haul trailer so that people going down the road go, "Who the hell is that?" But no such luck. The guys that developed this don't pretend that it's perfect. And to their credit, the last time I read anything about it, they said that 3 people worldwide, they were aware of 3 people who had successfully picked a Bowley lock. All 3 were internationally recognized as lock sport enthusiasts, and all 3 had custom hardware made to accomplish the attack. And I don't know if there's been, I haven't looked recently, so I don't know if there's been a newer attack or not. Yes, sir?
So it looks to me like what you're saying with the Bowley lock is you're reaching a point where physical bypass makes more sense than actually bypassing the lock, just bolt cutters or something like that.
Physical access always trumps. The question is it worth doing? And I'm going to address that on some of the later vignettes. But you're exactly on the right track. For this one, I'm going to demonstrate. One of the problems with this is the keys. This is one of the original Bowley locks. Can you see how sharp that is? These things would tear a hole in your pocket if you left them in there all the time. So now, the way this thing works, the access to the pins is like a left U-turn once you get inside the lock. So you insert the key like so, and turn it part way, and then push it in further, and then turn it again. And there we have the lock open. So it's a non-trivial exercise. And getting back to, I locked it before I put the shackle back in. That was stupid. There we go. So getting in there, it needs to be completely seated before I take the key out. So getting in there to take the thing apart is quite an exercise. And like I said, the people who successfully attacked the Bowley used custom hardware. Now, to their credit, Bowley realized it ain't great, and they came out with this, a new lock called the Rotacera, and it has a very peculiar key. This is what the Rotacera key looks like. Now, I don't know if you can see. I'm going to try to get this to zoom up closer. I'm going to turn this, and you can see there's these little ridges in the key. They're like key bittings. You see that? So these slip in the lock like so. And it's a similar exercise. You turn part way around. These don't get much exercise, so they're kind of sticky. There we go. And then you can open that up. Now, the other part that's really brilliant about this model is instead of making the whole lock like they did here, Boley makes this as a plug to be installed in other locks. So you buy the ABUS lock from another supplier, or you can buy it from Boley, and with this installed in it. So, much smarter thing, but still, really funky key. And this key has sharp edges on it that you wouldn't expect to have in a regular house key. Any question about Boley? Oh, and a remark here, very much like FIPS mode. How many people in here actually use or know anything about FIPS mode? Oh, good. Okay. So for those of you that raised your hands, obviously you have FIPS mode in your product that you have for your customers, right? How many of you are actually aware of customers who are running their systems in FIPS mode? You guys are lying. You serious? You're actually running FIPS mode?
How many non-federal customers?
So that's a good point. So honest to gosh, I've done the trusted computing group stuff. I've done a lot of work on this area, and it's never failed to amaze me the number of people who insist on FIPS mode, want FIPS mode to be available. They never run it. So they talk about it a great deal, and they never exploit the benefits of it. And so a lot of the really fine lock security is like that. It's annoying enough that people want to be able to use it. They talk about having it available, and they want to engage in it, and then, at the end of the day, they've got a pin like 1, 2, 3, 4 or something like that. They just don't actually use it. So, my favorite lock in this whole escapade, the Miracle Magnetic Lock. Back in the 60s, this company called, I love the name of this company, Liquidonics Industries. It sounds like something from Buckaroo Banzai. And, laugh while you can, the monkey boy. This promised to be the incredible thing here. And I have, is that my miracle? Yeah, this is my miracle. I have a whole collection of these now, but I'll tell you a true story about this after I explain the genesis of the lock. So this lock has a set of magnets, and you can see them on the key. Over on the right-hand side, those circles along the shaft of the key are magnets that are oriented north-south, small rare earth magnets. When inserted into the lock, the magnets combine with the key bitting. It's a regular pen tumbler lock that has a magnetic functionality added to it. And so you have to have the correct magnets and so forth and the correct key cut before you can turn the plug. All right? Now, it turns out, this was all the rage in the early 60s. Defense Department was behind it. They equipped lots of stuff with these things. By the end of the decade, they were gone. And I think the company was gone. I haven't been able to find much on the history of this outfit. And the reason is it turns out that figuring out the 4 magnet orientations is not all that difficult. There's not many permutations. And once you figure that out, you've got a keyway that's as big as a barn door. It's one of the easiest locks to do single pin picking on because it's an extravagant amount of space in there. It's twice the thickness. I'll show you in the next one. I'll show you for comparison. Here's the Miracle Magnetic Lock, and I'll pull the key out there, and yeah, where did I put the other? Oh, here's the other one. So there's a traditional keyway next to it for my garage door, much smaller. It's like half the width. So my Miracle Magnet. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Question.
Do all the pins bind before whatever the magnets are? So can you kind of just pick it, single pin pick it, and then do the magnet stuff? Or do you have to do kind of both together?
You need to do the magnets first.
Okay.
And I haven't played with it much. I've got a bunch of magnets, but I will tell you, don't try this at work, because introducing rare earth magnets of that intensity and that diameter in the IT workplace is a sure way to make enemies. So you want to, if you LPL has a great video on attacking this, and I will tell you, LPL's video, I go on eBay and I buy a lot of locks on there, and I have learned over time, I set my limit for what type of lock is typically $3 a lock, because I do these builds for doing the progressive locks and so forth. For some special stuff, I'll go higher, maybe up as much as $5 or $8 a lock if it's something really special. But I've learned the thing comes up, I set my price, I walk away. And occasionally I get sucked in. I really wanted a miracle lock. It was the first time I was buying one. And bidding went up $200-300. I was like, God, I can't believe this. This is just nuts. And then it took off. And it was almost $1,000 and it was sold. I just got pissed off and I walked away from the whole thing. And middle of the following week, here came LPL. Today I have for you an oddity from the 60s, the miracle magnetic lock. So I was bidding against him. And I wasn't the last person bidding against him. Somebody else was doing that. But anyhow, that's my miracle magnetic lock story. I later got several for far less than $200. I recommend, they're fun to play with, but you do need a tool that's going to hold your magnets in place while you're using it, because then you have to leave the magnet in there and then remove the tool, and then you do single pin picking. So it's an interesting exercise. I need to move on. Any questions about the miracle magnetic lock? Yes, sir.
Were the magnets pushing or pulling?
Yes. Both. Both. And they're holding a pin in the traditional sense.
Could you just bump it possibly?
But
to get them to shift and...
No, the side pins don't have direct contact. The magnetism will push through the plug wall, so it's a non-contactable pin.
So the lesson on this one is, don't get carried away. Come up with really cool stuff. You sell everybody on it, and it turns out you really didn't think it through enough. Okay? I'm sure it's an embarrassing exercise. So vignette 10, why don't we build a perfect lock? We do know how to build a perfect lock. But you know what? The market for that sucks. So at the end of the day, people expect their locksmith to be able to support them. Right? And so we build other protections in around the whole thing. But we have to be prepared to pick a lock or to open it up or drill it out or whatever in the same way. And of course the lesson on this one is people just kick the door in. A lot of these examples in the terms of software code have to do with backdoors. I hate backdoors. I spent years dealing with backdoors that were surprises, and somebody finally said, we weren't supposed to tell you about this, but there's actually a backdoor. Oh, God. And it's just bad news. I will acknowledge there are circumstances where people need them, but they're a bad idea. Most do not. So what I did here is I summarized all the lessons on these two slides. Nobody builds a perfect lock. Don't ignore history. Be aware of hobbyists versus professionals. The clever issue, any fool can reproduce an attack. Someone can go after the foundation, the underpinnings of your thing, rather than your thing that you built that's beautiful itself. Don't have side entrances. Security theory obscurity sucks. Impressive security solutions are wonderful, but they can be awkward. There are other words that I would use here, but they were not polite. Lesson 9, if your astonishingly brilliant security design adds a bunch of crap, you're likely to degrade the system's security posture. And lesson 10, the internet's awash with devices with hard-coded credentials. You can look these up online. Look up your own product. You might be surprised. And that's what I have. I have lots of other stuff. In closing, I have one here that I want to point out that is fun. And Bill Beers, I'm going to ask Bill to come up and help me with this. Does anybody recognize what this is? Oh, I'm sorry. That would work, wouldn't it? I have to go back to this one. There we go. So, anybody recognize this creature? Okay, shut up. I'm not giving you. I'm not giving you any picks, dude. So, anybody else recognize this?
It's a mailbox.
No?
Mailbox lock? That's an interesting approach. So. No, it works. Just give me a minute. Is that on the screen? That's on the screen. There we go. Where's the flange? There's the flange. It says non-standard dial. There we go. Well, in theory,
No, it's in place right now.
yeah. So I'm not going to take the key out because I might not be able to get it back in. So in theory here, you see, you're supposed to be able to, I'm going to raise this up so you can see the whole phone. So in theory, this keeps this phone from being used, right? Bill, please, you come around this way. Please demonstrate how we would make a phone call on this secured telephone.
Well, there might be two ways, actually, because you could, if you want to dial,
Yeah, why don't you stand closer there?
well, it's under the,
Yeah, there
can
we
you
go.
still see it?
Yep.
Yeah. If it's, so if you want to dial a 0, it's,
It's not secured at all. Or even better. And that would dial.
yeah.
This stupid lock does nothing. But it did do one thing. It liberated $3 out of me on eBay once.
Those $3 appreciated the freedom.
Yeah.
This was in a motion picture. When someone's in a corrections environment.
Even better. Well, this one might be going to prison. I don't think. All right. So I have other lessons. I ran out of time. I actually have a combo lock from my classified days that has the R suffix, which is for radiological. It means it's radio transparent, so the attacker can't X-ray your lock to see what the combo is. Yes, there's a question back there.
What is the difference between picking a single pin lock versus spool lock?
There are spool pins. Are you referring to spool pins in the lock?
Yes.
So a spool pin is just like a thread spool in that the diameter of the pin is larger at the top and the bottom, and it's got a smaller diameter in the middle. What a spool pin does is it thwarts raking attacks and other simple attacks. As you're trying to raise the pin, when you're single pin picking, the spool pin will get canted at funny angles and catch and give you what's called a false set. And you'll think you've set that pin in the correct spot, and you can't possibly open it. So it's basically a mechanism to make it more difficult to pick the lock. It's not impossible. The easy way to get around it, what's that?
You still pick it the same way?
You do with a little added knowledge. Once you recognize that you're dealing with a spool pin, and there's others, there's other types of pins, a similar one. A spool pin in particular, if you're dealing with a spool pin, when you're raising up tension and you try to turn with the torsion wrench at the same time, it will push back. So you can feel it. It's very subtle, but you can feel it pushing back, and then you can try to raise it. But it's similar attacks. And my time is up. Any further question? Well, quickly.
I was going to ask, what would the best, form for picking a spool lock be?
Let me answer that one in the hallway outside because they need to get the next speaker up, and I need to clean up. Thank you.